Start recording.
All right. So welcome everyone to the October meeting of the Tri-Valley Demos. We're going to start off with the Pledge of Allegiance. So if you would like to follow along, please do. And we'll begin. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States
of America,
and to the republic for which it stands, one
one nation,
under
under
God,
God,
indivisible,
indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right. Thank you everyone for coming. I'm going to post a couple of links really quickly into the chat so everyone can get the agenda for today. Thank you all for coming. I'm going to be relatively brief with my opening statement so we can really just get to the meat of the meeting. We have a very exciting meeting today. We have on our agenda a couple of items. So we're going to talk about the Tri-Valley housing crisis. We have three presenters with us, Alfred Tu, Monith, I actually don't know how to say your last name. Ilverson, and Asa Strapp. And so they're going to be giving us a brief presentation on that, and I believe answering some questions. One of the inspirations for this meeting is just talking about generally the issues that we are having with housing in the area. As many people may know, housing prices have gone up dramatically over the past several years, and it is causing a particular crunch on the younger generation. And additionally, there is some, in the future, I really want us to have an opportunity as I'm working on the bylaws and looking at how I would like to update them. One of the things I'm looking at is really grounding our decisions and our policy making in the Democratic Party's ideals. And so looking at where we can, really seeing what the party platform says about different issues, where the party is, and making sure that our club either lines up with them, or where we don't and we decide not to, that we're making that as a conscious decision. So we have kind of a jumping off point. And so there'll be some discussion on that as well. And then following up, after we have our housing discussion, we are very lucky to have DA candidate Jimmie Wilson here with us today. And he will be speaking with the club and just introducing himself. It is a meet and greet meeting. We are not endorsing today, but I just wanted to give a chance I'm trying to reach out to each of the DA candidates and give them a chance to just come say hi to the club before we do our endorsement meeting. I figure we met with Pamela Price a few months ago, and so I want to make sure we have the opportunity to meet with each of the candidates before we do our endorsement meeting. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to our presenters, Monith and Alfred. Are you guys ready to go, or should we give Asa a minute?
Yeah, I think if we can give Asa maybe a minute, or he's putting his baby down to sleep. So
okay.
He'll be here in a minute or two, I think.
Sounds good. I'll give him just a minute, and then I'm going to go with a couple of quick announcements then at the top of our meeting. And so there's a few things I was going to announce at the end, but I'll do it now. So first is, as a club, we're looking at doing something for Giving Tuesday, but we haven't come up with exactly what that something is going to be yet. And so I'd like to ask club members, if you know of an organization we can partner with, if you have any activities that you know are happening where our support would be helpful, or ideas on where we can basically use our powers for good, please let us know. You can send either me or Jackie an email filling us in on what you think or connection there. So our next meeting in November, we'd like to have an action in place that we can then take for the next 2 weeks, either to Thanksgiving or Giving Tuesday, to really be able to help our community. So something Tri-Valley focused, somewhere where we can help those who are less fortunate than ourselves, something where we can really use our energies to the best of their effect. So I know we have a lot of influential and connected people on the call. So anything you have would be greatly appreciated. Other than that, we have Eric Swalwell, our representative, is beginning to start, or is doing some work, I should say, not beginning, is doing some work on the Virginia Get Out the Vote campaign. Oh, we got a visitor. And so he's looking at a couple of events at the end of October. I'll get the exact date and times out to everyone, but it should be the last week or 2 weeks of October, where we'll be doing phone banking with Eric, and our club is looking to partner with him on that. So stay tuned for an email to see if, or stay tuned for an email for all of the details on that. And then the last thing, Richard, this was an announcement I was going to make, but since you're here, do you want to announce the Young Dems event?
Sure. Thanks, Evan. So something that I wanted to bring up, I am the chief of staff of the East Bay Young Dems organization. They are hosting their gala on Saturday, November 6th. It's going to be in the evening. This is something that they do every year. It's a family-friendly event. They invite some local electeds, some local orgs to give sponsorships, and it should be just a fun time. And we were wondering if the Tri-Valley Dems would be willing to sponsor this event. And details, I don't know if we need to go into details, but basically it would just involve a donation and a couple of tickets to the event. And just wanted to let you all know that this event is out there, it exists, and if there are any comments or any thoughts, then feel free to let me know, and I can drop in my email here in the chat if anybody, I guess, wants more details and more information.
Yes, Sean.
Well, I didn't want to move on, and if we weren't done with Richards, I had another announcement. If we're still killing time before our panel discussion.
Oh, I did actually want to follow up on Richard's announcement, and because it would be a club expenditure, I know this is not on the agenda, but it was added kind of last minute. So the organizer level is a $500 donation. I think that supporting the Young Dems is a absolute worthy cause. They've been great partners in the past, and they do a lot of excellent activities. And so I do want to put it forward to the club. I am not sure if people want to wait for the treasurer's report first just to see where we're at, or if they want to, or if Alan wants to give us a nod that $500 won't bankrupt us. But I would turn it over to the club for a vote. So Alan, do you think we can fit that in with the treasurer's report, or? You're muted right now.
There. The answer is yes, we can afford it. The funny thing about it is we had made a $500 donation to Reverend Warnock's campaign, and he never cashed the check. And that was about a year ago. So that's still on the books. And yeah. We can't afford it.
Okay, cool. Then as an action item, Richard, if I forget, please remind me when we get to the treasurer's report, and we'll vote on it then. We do have the other guests, but Sean, did you want to just briefly give your announcement?
Oh yeah, just two other events coming up, and maybe Sarah can post instructions in the chat. I think I saw Sarah on here. San Ramon Valley, great. San Ramon Valley Dems is having a great panel discussion on housing affordability this Thursday. It's going to have some really great speakers. So if this is a topic that interests you and you want to learn more, please follow the instructions to receive an invite for the Zoom meeting on Thursday. Brody did say that all are welcome. You just need to email over to the San Ramon Valley Dems president mailbox and they will get you the link. And then second, there is, for those of you who are really moved by this topic and you want to join a YIMBY Action party, they are having one on November 5th. It's in Oakland, I believe. And it's 5:30 to 6:30 on November 5th. And I actually know someone who has 2 free tickets. So if you message me and that's something that interests, I'll drop you the link to the event details in the chat here. But if that's something that interests you and you'd like the free tickets, just let me know. First come, first served. Thanks.
Cool. Thank you very much for those announcements. And with that, I think perfect timing since I scheduled the start of the presentation for 7:10 and everyone is here now. I think I'm going to turn it over to Alfred, Monith, and Asa for their presentation. And thank you very much, the 3 of you, for doing this for us. I'm very excited. Oh, and let me know if you need, which one of you needs share screen privileges.
Awesome. I think Asa is going to get us kicked off, but I can share screen if that works for you, Asa.
Yeah, that works.
Great. So Evan, if you can give me screen sharing capabilities, I can share my screen.
Okay. Oh, they changed. Or actually, do we have Jackie? Do we have share screen enabled for everyone right now? I think.
Hold up.
Try
Hold
sharing
up.
screen.
I'm going to make him a co-host.
Okay.
And he can share.
There you go.
Do you see the share screen now?
Yeah, we should be good to go. Thank you. Is everybody able to see the slide? Okay.
Good.
Great.
Beautiful.
Okay, great. So, Mo, did you want to start off and just go through the front or how do you want to do this?
Yeah, do you want to kick off the agenda and then I'll hop in on after the kind of the housing exercise.
Cool. Yeah, so just to kind of give some context, this is not going to be a Cal level crash course on housing. This is actually really quick housing. We're not going to go over all the aspects of each of these, when we have like items like causes and impacts, we're not going to cover like every single one. It's not going to be exhaustive, but just really quickly, we're going to go through some introductions, super quick exercise, some causes, impacts, state and local housing policy, which will be presented by Alfred, and then some stuff that we can do or you can do as an individual and we can do as a club, and then just some quick QA and discussion. So it's going to be a pretty quick and painless presentation. And so, Monith, I'll let you just introduce yourself.
Yeah, we can do introduction. So, hey everybody, my name is Monith. I'm a resident of Pleasanton. I'm a local Tri-Valley organizer and also the Pleasanton rep to the Housing of Alameda Housing Authority, the County of Alameda Housing Authority. Asa, you want to go ahead and then we can go to Alfred?
Yeah, and so my name is Asa. I've been a member of the club for quite some time. Helped co-found with Evan, nonprofit for getting people more quickly engaged in Livermore, and have been really advocating for housing within Livermore and then just in the Tri-Valleys in general for quite some time.
Thank you. And I'm Alfred. I work as an architect, so I design housing as a job. And then I also have been involved a lot in the Democratic Party around housing policy, tenant protection policy, on the board of the Renters Council in the state party, and also am on the state party as delegate.
Okay, so we're just going to jump into just a quick exercise here. Just super quick question. You can type in chat or you can say it out loud. Does anybody have an idea what these numbers mean? Any guesses? There are no wrong answers. Okay, so jump to the next up. We got one answer. Lots of money from Sarah. That's a good one. And
Okay, so I think you're muted.
Thanks, Are you able to hear us? I think your sound cut off. Your microphone disappeared.
Yeah, I think he disconnected somehow his.
apologies, I disconnected. So yeah, so there are some answers there. So we can go to the next slide, Mona. And so yeah, so these are the median home prices of every Tri-Valley city as of August 2021. So you can see that every city aside from Livermore is above $1 million. And again, this is as of August 2021. And so when you think about the financial need required to buy a house, typically you need 20%. So you're looking at an individual needing almost at a minimum $200,000 to buy anywhere within the Tri-Valley. So that was our quick exercise. And now jumping kind of into our causes, there's a myriad of reasons of why housing prices are going crazy in the Bay Area. And this just is a general highlight of one of the reasons. So we have an extreme jobs to housing growth imbalance across the board. There are some counties who are doing a lot better than others, like Solano's got a 3-to-1, that's really good. Contra Costa's got a 3-to-1, that's really good. But Alameda County, where we are, we have a 5-to-1. And so you can get more granular with these numbers here, but what we're seeing here is basically there are far more jobs being created and demand for housing than houses being built. And so I always look at the big three offenders, San Francisco, San Mateo, and Santa Clara, as these really behemoths across the board, and the result is like a rippling effect across the entire Bay Area economy, where you have a city like San Francisco, where at one point, I'm sure this number needs to get updated, but at one point they added 120,000 jobs, but only added like 25,000 housing units. So when you have that kind of impact, where you have so many people living or trying to work in San Francisco, they don't want to live too far from work. And so if they can't get a house inside San Francisco, they're on the surrounding cities. And then those surrounding cities have their own housing imbalance. And then it kind of creates that ripple effect of housing imbalance. And so that's kind of, one of the major causes is, the economics law of supply and demand exists. And this is where we are when it comes to across the board housing issues.
Cool, thanks, Asa. Another thing that we're dealing with in terms of causes is specific state and local government zoning laws that have been in place specifically here in the Tri-Valley. So these are just some headlines that we grabbed from a few years ago, and then also from now. There has been this consistent drive, at least here in the Tri-Valley, to limit the building of housing, specifically the building of more affordable by design, higher density housing in our neighborhoods, which contributes to the next slide, which is the number of permits that we give for the construction of housing relative to the population growth that we see. So California has seen some of the highest population growth in the nation, both in terms of population growth from overseas, but also within the state, within the country itself, from people from other states coming in. But our permitting process, or our ability to build housing across the board, has fallen much farther behind relative to other states that have actually seen outflows of people. And going back on what Asa said earlier in terms of what these house prices actually mean. So what is the reality of what these house prices actually mean today? And how does that compare to, let's just say, 30 years ago? So when you take a look at the raw numbers of what actually is needed in order to purchase a house in any city here in the Tri-Valley relative to what it was like before, we see the clear effects of local policy and local permitting on the effects of the ability of an individual, a family, to be able to purchase a home out here in the Tri-Valley. And just wanted to add, and also this has a downstream effects on rents as well. So as we don't have enough housing units for folks, these rents are increasing on a yearly basis consistently. And I just wanted to put kind of just to kind of level set ourselves and what actual impacts this has on our community as a whole. So on the right is this publicly available information around what the pay schedule is for a Pleasanton teacher from when they start to when to a few years after they are teaching. And nowhere on this pay schedule is enough money to be able to rent in the city in which you teach in. So this is the kind of real world impacts that you see in terms of what high housing costs, high rental costs have on individuals and folks who live and work in one's community. And so I'll pass it back over to Asa.
Yeah, and I'd actually, jumping back to that too, in terms of teacher salaries, my understanding is that Pleasanton is also one of the highest paid districts. I think San Ramon might be slightly higher than the rest of the districts in the Tri-Valley, meaning that the other cities like Dublin and Livermore would be underneath that even more so. I think the starting salary for a teacher in Livermore is in the 50s, 50,000 range versus the 60,000 range. So just wanted to call that out too, because that is, when we talk about teacher salaries, that's a generous perception of it. So now another impact of high housing costs and people having to live further away from work is the impact of commute pollution, right? So we have, and this is coming from, we have sourced all of our details here. So 41% of all pollution in California is generated from transportation. Understanding that transportation is not just car transportation, there are other factors within that. But when we talk about what's our biggest cause of pollution and how to tackle that, you got to look at transportation as the biggest pie and then start figuring out ways to make that slice of the pie smaller. And when we talk about housing, we have individuals, like myself, when the office was opened, I was commuting to Redwood Shores. So that's an hour and a half commute time. And that's not an uncommon commute travel. So you have, the San Francisco statistic that I mentioned of 120,000 jobs with 20,000 housing units. You have more people heading into the city, and not everybody can take part. So a lot of people are going over the Bay Bridge, they're driving up the peninsula, they're driving down the Golden Gate Bridge into San Francisco, and that again cascades out from there. So with the intent of, when we talk about building more housing, or it's really housing where people work, so that to reduce the vehicle miles traveled, that would reduce emissions and improve road safety as well. So there's just less vehicles on the road in general. So then we don't have to commute long distance and continue to pollute our state and our planet. So that actually leads to the next slide, which this was just a little fun chart that I had found, which highlighted I guess it was CO2, the emissions from cars pre and post pandemic in terms of when the shelter took place. I think everybody can recall that the air quality was amazing at that time. And it had just rained, so it was really fresh. But there was like near zero cars on the road aside those that still had to drive. And so just the amount of pollution in the air was just crazy. And so you can look at this. This is actually almost like what would an ideal impact of putting more people closer to where they work. So they're not on the highway for so long. They're just having a 15, 20-minute commute versus these hour and a half to 2 hour long commutes. And so we would have a serious impact on pollution generation throughout the week by getting people off the road. And hopefully we start looking more like, Saturday and Sunday versus our peaks and valleys that we have throughout the workday. And so that was just a little fun little piece of information that I dug up during the pollution research really quick. And so now I'm actually going to hand it over to Alfred, and we're going to have him talk about our affordable housing laws and other housing laws in California.
Sure, thank you. So, as you can probably imagine, the California Democratic Party recognizes that housing is one of the big issues that Democrats need to work on and deliver on to keep people satisfied. So the way that the state party looks at housing is there's a few main issues. There's the environmental impacts of all the commuting that was just mentioned. There's the housing affordability question. And then to address those issues, there are questions of zoning and land use, which is basically what are people allowed to build in different places, as well as tenant and homeowner protections. For example, we all have heard of how during COVID, the state has stepped in and put limits on when people can be kicked out of their home if they're behind on rent. And then the state had the rent relief program. So that's also another leg of the platform for housing. In the main platform preamble, which is the introductory page to our multi-page party platform, the key housing message is that we want to locate the affordable housing near public transportation. And again, that's both to cut down on traffic pollution, and it's also to make it easier for people to get to work in other places they need to go. So let's go to the next slide. So in the last few years, there's been a lot of housing legislation. I've been keeping track, over 100 bills introduced every year, usually about 2 or 3 dozen of them make it all the way through. Some of the notable ones from the last few years include the statewide rent cap, also known as Assembly Bill 1482. So some of the larger cities in the Bay Area, like San Francisco or Oakland or San Jose, they have rent control, which is a local law that limits how much rent can go up each year. For the rest of the cities, including the Tri-Valley, where that hasn't been passed, the state law from a couple years ago, the rent cap said that rent cannot go up more than inflation plus 5% a year. And as we've seen how much housing costs have increased in the last couple of years, the rent cap has done a lot of work in keeping the rent increases just barely manageable. It's still a few percent a year adds up pretty quickly, but it does prevent some of the horror stories from before where people were having their rent doubled. The other big legislation I mentioned earlier was the emergency rent relief. And then on the production side, the zoning side, first there were the accessory dwelling unit bills. These were bills that says you could build an apartment in your backyard or by converting your garage. And building on that, the big one this year was Senate Bill 9. And this is also known as the duplex and lot split bill. And what it says is that if you have a lot that's currently single family, which means you can only put one house on it previously, you'll be able to use SB 9 to first split the lot into 2 lots, and then also put 2 homes on each lot. And the idea here is that when we talk about housing being expensive in the Bay Area, it's not so much the houses that are expensive, it's the land that they sit on. And by allowing one piece of land to hold multiple houses, that would bring down the land cost, which is the bulk of the cost of homeownership right now in California. And this also has some other benefits. For example, if someone has a family and they have their kids who don't have a place to live, they can now build a house for them in their backyard. And for people who need some extra income for retirement, they now have the option to sell their backyard and have someone else build a house there, and they get to keep the money from selling the land. And that's actually the big change between Senate Bill 9 and the accessory dwelling unit bills from a few years ago, is that previously the backyard cottages could only be rented, but now people will be able to become homeowners as well. All right, so let's go to the next slide. At the local level, different things going on right now is the housing element update in every city's general plan. So the state requires every city to identify every 8 years where they will be building the housing that that city is expected to build over the next 8 years. And that's called the housing element. And each city will put together a document that will identify different sites. For example, it could be a vacant land, it could be an old shopping center, and they send this list to the state and says, the state will look at it and say, okay, yes, you have enough space for your future housing needs, or no, you have to adjust the zoning in some places. Other local policies include urban growth boundaries. These are usually lines far out at the edge of town that says we're not going to build any more houses past this line. And that's to help protect farmland or natural habitat. Another local policy that's coming to the Tri-Valley is there's this rail project called the Valley Link. And it's basically an extension of the BART line that will go from the current Belton Pleasanton BART all the way out past Tracy to Lathrop, which is near Stockton. And each of these stations will be locations that could be places where more apartment buildings to go and help meet the need for each city's housing element. And then finally, cities can also look at local tenant protection ordinances above and beyond what the state does. Examples of that might be, in San Francisco, there's a program where if a tenant can't afford a lawyer, the city will provide them one if they're facing eviction. And that has been shown to help protect people who might otherwise not be able to get a fair day in court. So with that, I will take some questions.
Hey, thank you very much for the presentation. I really appreciate it. I want to remind everyone, if you do have any questions, please raise your hand. You can either raise hand in chat or I'll keep an eye out for you. And I'll call on you just so we don't have people talking over each other. But I do want to, just as a brief kind of preamble to any questions that anyone has, point out or bring up a few things that I learned kind of during this process going through it with them is, one is the party platform is actually very prescriptive on really looking to try to help people find housing in California. And so the Democratic Party really is interested in helping people, particularly low income, find housing. And I know that one of the big issues for all of us, and one of the things that comes up over and over in the club is, how do we help our fellow man? How do we help our planet? How do we help the world? We look for a lot of ways as a Democratic Party to really think of, others. We're looking to try to help people. And in the end, one of the things that is absolutely true is if a person doesn't have food and shelter, then there's just no way that they're going to be able to help themselves. They're not going to be able to improve their lot in life. It is incredibly difficult to move forward if you are worried about housing, if you're worried about food. And so when we talk about this issue, it's easy to dismiss parts of it or to get into nitty-gritty details. But the ultimate truth is we need housing. We need people to be able to live somewhere. There are people out there who who do not have homes. And until they have homes, they will be suffering. And so I want to make sure that we have that framing as we talk forward, or as we move forward and as we talk about it. I think this is a absolutely vital issue for us to learn more about, and hopefully we can do our part to help with. So with that, I see a question from Jackie.
Yes, and I guess it's kind of a statement, and then I'd kind of like to get feedback from the panel as far as what, you know, their stance on this. I see housing as an almost impossible issue to build our way out of. You know, I was born and raised here, and I remember the times when all Fremont was nothing but fruit trees and open space. And they have built to the hilt there, and it has not solved the housing problem. It's only made it worse. I'm curious, to me, it's income. The income that people are making is less than what they were making 30 years ago. And then when you add on the inflation of food and healthcare and housing and everything else, it's an unmanageable task. So I just don't know how building is ever going to solve the issue if we don't focus on wages as the #1 issue. It's not really housing, it's that people aren't making enough to live in this area for what the cost of everything is. And the housing issue is going on in other places now too. Everything is so expensive. So, you know, how are we going to tackle this by just building for a handful of people when the wages are stagnant? I kind of like to get the panel's opinion on that. Thank you.
So actually, so I know, so I want to answer that question. So I do want to also say, I want to get Alfred's thoughts on questions geared towards him, and if there's any other questions about any of those laws that we just mentioned, we're at that level, because I know Alfred has to drop first. So if there's any questions, Alfred, feel free to answer that question, but if there's any other questions that, you know, specifically around policy that Alfred could tackle, let's get those kind of queued up too. So then Alfred can go, and then the whole club can have a longer discussion.
Sure, I'll go ahead and answer this first question. So part of the reason we got into the mess where we're at is that there is one industry in the Bay Area, technology, where the incomes have gotten very high, and a lot of people are making a lot of money in those industries, and they have driven up the cost of housing as a result. But in other places, people who make a middle-class income are able to buy a house. You can buy houses in most of the country for far less than in Dry Valley. And so I do think that there are 3 separate housing crises. There are people who have no income at all. And for that, you need to have some kind of subsidy. You have people who are currently making very low income, for example, people making minimum wage. And in that case, that's definitely a case where we need to raise the incomes. But then when you've got people who are earning solid middle-class incomes, that would be more than enough to live on in most parts of the country. And that's where we are seeing this California-specific housing shortage play out.
All right, thank you very much. Next, I see Valerie.
Yes, thank you, Evan, and thank you for the presentation. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Valerie Arkin. I'm a current Pleasanton City Council member, elected a year ago, was on the school board for 12 years before that, been a member of this club for, I think, about 15 years, and the County Central Committee for, oh gosh, at least 11, 12 years. Anyhow, regarding this subject, and I, you know, with my campaign and everything, I absolutely agree that we need more affordable housing. I campaigned on that. We absolutely need to address it. People do need a place to live, and you know, the solutions are the hard part about it. SB 9 and 10 do not address affordability at all. And all it's going to do is make developers and investors richer. It's not going to address the affordability. You can split a lot into 4 houses, but if you do that in Pleasanton, I guarantee they're not going to be affordable. So I think, unfortunately, that really isn't a solution to me. I think we need to build more affordable, not more market rate, especially in Pleasanton, but I think in the Tri-Valley in general, we have a lot of market rate housing. We don't have enough affordable. So that's the problem we need to address. It doesn't follow a straight supply and demand. The market conditions are what affect the prices. And one thing that hasn't been mentioned are investors that are buying up homes. I see it in Pleasanton all the time. There are, investors, a lot of foreign investors as well, buying up homes. They leave them empty, or they rent them at, top dollar, but they are driving up the cost because they can, so many of them are going hundreds of thousands over the asking price. It is pricing people out of the market here as well. And I know Canada is trying to address that. I don't know too much about it yet, but I know they're trying to limit foreign investors buying up all the housing in Canada. So I think that's an issue that I think we all need to start looking at to see that could be one of the solutions. But we're working on the housing element right now in Pleasanton. We are addressing, we are going to address the affordability, of course. Every council member is committed to that. And, I think being near to public transportation, I completely agree with. And that's a big point to consider. But also, how do we pay for the affordable housing? If we're not going to do as much market rate, which I think we don't need, how do we pay for the affordable? And we need to get creative solutions. There are ways I think we can address it, but I just do want to make the point that something like SB 9 is not going, I don't think is going to help. And we need to really focus on solutions. Thank you.
So I actually asked, of those who have their hands up, I see Valerie still has hers up, Rudy, Jeff, and Sean. Are any of those questions geared toward the policies or anything like that that Alfred would address? Because if not, because I know Alfred, you had a 7:30 expiration date, so I don't want to keep you here past any longer than you need to be here.
Yeah, I can go to 8 o'clock.
Okay. So
yeah, my question is for Alfred.
Okay.
All right, hi everyone. My name is Rudy Espinoza. I am a director at Unity Action and also co-chair of the Resolutions Committee for the California Democratic Party. Happy to be here and listen to these panelists speak. Alfred, will you talk a little bit about how increasing market rate housing, even when we think about these ADUs, so what we think like SB 9 and SB 10 can do, how that can help increase the housing stock and hopefully drive prices a bit down to more affordable levels. I hear just conversation about, one person talking about, I believe it was Jackie on wages and increasing wages, and then someone else saying we just need affordable. Can you talk a little bit about what some of those problems and how they involve with the subjects that Jackie and I forget the other person that they brought up?
Valerie.
Sure. So let's start with the issue of affordable housing. So right now, there's 2 main sources for where money for affordable housing comes from. One of them is state money and federal money, but that is competitive. So every city has to compete with others in the state for that, because the amount is far more than what any individual city could do unless they were to double their taxes, which is difficult to do because of Prop 13. However, one of the other main sources of funding for affordable housing is the construction of private housing. In San Francisco, for example, they have what's called the Inclusionary Housing Ordinance, which says that a certain amount of apartments in a new building have to be rented at low cost for low-income residents. In Oakland, they go a step further, where even if you build a standalone house, obviously you can't have a fraction of a house be low income, but what they do have is the builder of that house has to pay a fee into a fund that the city can then use to build low income housing. So that's one way that the production of high income and low income housing are linked together in California. And the other thing to remember is that even though a lot of these new apartment buildings are fairly expensive because they're new, kind of like how a new car costs more than a used car, there's two things going on. They are still cheaper to live in than a standalone house, even an old house. And the other thing is that just like cars get cheaper when they get older, unless there's a shortage of used cars like we are in this year, the same thing happens with housing in most places, where as long as there are enough homes being built every year, eventually the new homes become the old homes and they become cheaper over time. But one last thing I want to talk about is the issue of the foreign money going into the American real estate market. And that is an issue where the US has some of the most ineffective laws around transparency of ownership. Other countries have gotten their act together over the last couple decades. And as a result, it's harder for people to hide money in Swiss bank accounts like it used to be. And so instead, they're hiding it in American real estate. And so there have been state laws that were introduced this year to require disclosure of who actually owns the property, or if somebody's renting a building, who the actual landlord is. Unfortunately, we didn't have the votes to move them forward this year, but they should be returning in 2022. But that is definitely something that we can work on to address that kind of issue.
Thank you so much. And I believe Sean is next.
Yeah, thanks, Evan, and thank you to the panelists for their time today on this important topic. I just wanted to, and I think Alfred kind of touched on it a lot, but there are various means to achieve subsidized affordable housing. And, those are the types of units where we see that are deed restricted to be below market rate, either by rent or by sale. And that is achieved through inclusionary zoning ordinances in our cities, and in large part by federal and state policy that allows for the construction of those types of units. But I think what also, when you say affordable, quote unquote, one of the big issues that we have here in California is just a long history of underproduction of housing. And I mean, you can look at the data over time and you can see that we have not kept up with the demand. And that is in large part due to the underproduction at the local level to meet the housing need. So those units are market rate, but they can be more affordable if there's more supply. And when you see phenomena like speculation, foreign investment, flipping, these are all phenomena largely driven by scarcity. So when you have a scarcity of supply, that brings speculators. We see this even in the stock market, for example, right? Where you'll have speculators come in and there might be, scarcity and supply around certain types of stocks. And then there's like a fever to buy it up, right? The same thing happens in housing. So right now, we are faced with an affordability crisis that is driven by a lack of supply. And, when you talk about affordable by design, Dublin's done a lot of it. And, you can argue whether or not that's a good policy or not, but I'll tell you personally, from my own perspective, I, as a 20-year veteran of the United States Navy with a master's degree and a career under my belt, cannot afford a median priced home in Pleasanton. There's something wrong with that picture. I can buy a 1,500 square foot townhome in Dublin. So that's what affordable by design means. It means bringing down the square footage, the type of design of home down so that more people can afford to purchase and live within the community. And last thing I wanted to mention is SB9, right? I think the verdict is still out on whether or not this is going to be a good thing, whether or not it's going to produce a lot of housing. But I would encourage everyone to take a look at the Turner Center report on what they think is the realistic outcome of SB9 as a policy. And it's not the scary investors are going to come up and buy up everything. Every home around you is going to turn into an 8-plex story that some people would have you think it is. It's a very small percentage of lots that are going to be realized. And the bill actually got watered down a lot, and there's not going to be any investors coming in because there's an owner requirement on those units now. That's it. Thanks.
Yeah. Oh, go ahead, Alfred.
One thing I wanted to add about the question of, is there enough housing being built, is you go to any city, you'll see, oh, there's a couple of office buildings being built, there's a couple of apartment buildings being built. That should be okay, right? Well, the fact is that for every office building that goes up, you need several apartment buildings to balance out the number of jobs versus the number of homes. You think about in an office building, how big a cubicle is, and think about how many cubicles you can fit in your house. It gives you an idea of how much more housing we need to build for every commercial building that's going up. And that's why, even though you might see equal numbers of office buildings and apartment buildings under construction, that is nowhere near enough apartment buildings.
Yeah, and I just there's a lot of discussion in the comments as well around the idea of supply and demand driving prices, and then there's also the concept of affordability, right? So I think when we have these conversations about housing, we need to be very clear with how we're talking about, because when we say affordable housing, we're talking about a subset of housing that is designated for those who are on typically the lower income rungs of the economy, versus market rate is whatever's out there, that's what the market can bear, right? And so that's the supply and demand side really impacts that market, like the market side, right? And there's actually real world examples due to COVID that actually shows that by increasing supplies has a drastic impact on housing prices. So, everyone heard about the great exodus from California, which it wasn't a great exodus of California. It was actually people leaving metro areas and moving to suburban areas, and then getting more space and kind of going to these cheaper markets. And it happened so drastically in San Francisco that it caused a 24% drop in the rental prices because there was just so much supply available because so many people moved out of San Francisco. And that caused, landlords to scramble. And what did they do? They lowered their rents. And you can hear these stories of landlords lowering their rents when a new apartment building opens up across the street. That's saying the market can bear $2,600 versus the apartments across the street charging $24. They go, well, I can spend $200 more for a brand new place versus something that's 50 years old. And then the rates kind of start to adjust to accommodate that. But there was also the one thing that's really, and I really wanted to highlight with the jobs to housing ratio imbalance, is when you have, let's bring it down to like smaller numbers. Like, let's say you have 20 people. I think 20 people, I think is one, or 8 people in San Francisco. There's 20 people trying to get 8 houses. And then you have a subset locked in for affordable, which is, let's say 3 of those houses. That leaves 7 houses between the remaining 17 people trying to live in a certain area. The people who are going to live in those remaining areas are those people who have money and who have wealth. To Jackie's point, it would be great to increase salaries of everybody, but it's also would be great to reduce the cost of living by providing more housing. So if there was more housing available, then there wouldn't be these bidding wars where houses are being bid up. I mean, in my neighborhood, a house listed for $950,000 in Livermore, it sold for 1.25, and it was on the market for 4 days. It's a single-story home built in 1972. It's a 4-bedroom, 2-bath. It's not some mansion out here. These are just those. That's a starter home, and it's because there's so few new houses being built in the area that those houses that are available in certain areas, especially in I live in Sunset West, which is a more desirable part of Livermore. Those areas are going like gangbusters because there isn't any other housing available that in these certain areas of certain cities. And so that's the trend that's happening across the Bay Area. So that's why I wanted to just clear out the affordable housing versus the market rate housing. And it really is a supply and demand. When you have so many people coming in, specifically tech sector jobs in the peninsula, who can't afford to live in the peninsula, even though they work in the tech, they're going to move to neighboring cities. And I know, and I bring that up, is I worked in San Mateo before my office moved to Redwood Shores. Right across the bridge is Fremont. And so one of the reasons housing prices are so expensive in Fremont is extreme easy access to Silicon Valley. San Jose to the south, peninsula, right across the San Mateo Bridge, and it's connected to BART to San Francisco. And you can get a relatively nice big house connected to the entire Bay Area economy. And so those kind of driving factors is, even though they built a lot of houses in the 70s and 80s, we didn't keep up that building. And so then that's when the housing supply started going. And I think if we brought up the presentation again, we can even bring up the slide of California housing permits, where there was a distinct drop. And with that drop, there was the increased housing prices of the 90s into the mid 2000s, then an economic collapse. But we didn't build during the collapse. And so now that the economy's recovered, it's filling right back up. Yeah, it's this presentation here. So you can see up until 1985, we were building, issuing housing permits, and we were the 7th ranked state in the entire nation. And now we're 37. And so it's no surprise that during that period that housing prices were going up because we slowed down building. But the demand for housing has not slowed down. People are still having kids. Now, when we talk about the solutions, I know people have mentioned that there's other things that we could do. We can tap down on foreign investment. We can tap down on BlackRock becoming the next corporate landlord. But these are all measures that we can do as a group. And I think that's the point of bringing these up is talking about all the tools in our tool belt. We don't just go to a construction site with a hammer. You bring all your tools to build a house. So I wanted to address those because I know we had some pent up stuff, and I had those comments for when Jackie had questions as well. So I do want to get, I think Jeff was next, if I look at the names.
Actually, I'm gonna interject here for a moment. Unfortunately, we are time limited today on this, and with Alfred's time as well as some other items. So I'm hoping that we'll have a chance to come back, but I'm actually going to turn it over back to the presenters because there were some next steps that they wanted to give us before we wrap and before they have to leave. So I'm going to turn this back over to the presenters for a bit, and then we'll come back to this closer to the end of the meeting if we have time. I very much apologize. I really did want to hear from everyone, but we are time limited today.
Understood. So the what can we do is we really had these items here, and I think Sean kind of tapped into it a little bit. There are a lot of local and regional housing advocacy organizations. There's a group that goes that's East Bay for Everyone that covers the entire East Bay, which Alfred, I know you're very involved with. And there's the new one. Sean, I'll let you kind of give a quick pitch on that one over time really fast. Oh, Sean's not here anymore. He may have dropped. Oh, he's muted. Anyways, So that's there's another local one. We can have Sean share some information if he ever hears us. And then there's other government meetings, right? So we also mentioned the general plan. Livermore starts their general plan process last week, and that'll be a 2-year endeavor. And the first element we talk about is housing. So that's going to be just the topic of discussion for the next 5 months within the general plan. There's city council meetings and planning commission meetings. I know Evan's a member of the Livermore Planning Commission. You know, Valerie and Julie are members of the Pleasanton Council. Valerie, you're actually the mayor, correct? I just want to make sure I got titles right.
I am a council member and Julie Testa is vice mayor.
Got it. Okay, sorry. So council member, vice mayor, Sean is also a member of the Dublin government as well. So lots of people just within the club that you can contact and have conversations with, which is what's great about having these kind of general conversations that we have. And the other thing too is the ask that Moneth and I were really wanted to get around was at some point in the near future is have a Tri-Valley Democrats housing policy. There is a statewide one, but it we looked into it and it's actually like connected to like 5 or 6 different issues, and it's not very like centralized. And so we really wanted to have like some sort of policy that makes it as clear as day that the club agrees on, the club votes on, that says this is the housing policy for the Tri-Valley Democrats. And I think that would be really like a guiding star for conversations that we have going forward within this club. And those were our action items. Unless Mona, if you had another one you wanted to quickly add.
No, that was great. So I'll also say that Pleasanton is also going through its housing element process. I think Valerie mentioned that before. So there are a few public meetings that have already happened. There's going to be a few more public meetings. The first draft of the housing element has been sent out, I believe. And so if anybody wants greater context, there's a few people on this call, myself, Valerie, Julie, that would probably be happy to chat through it. So there's resources here that people can reach out to if you want to get involved more or have an understanding what's going
on. All right. With that, I really want to thank our guests. I know this is a topic that is near and dear to many people who are here's hearts. So I do hope we can invite or we'll have a chance to bring all 3 of you back at some point and we can talk about a Tri-Valley Democrat housing policy in the near future. Like I said, this is a time constrained issue, so we are going to have to move on to the next issue, but or the next topic, I should say. The next one isn't an issue. Since we do have a special guest here with us. So I very much apologize to those of you who weren't able to get in your comments, but I am going to have to cut off this topic here. I do really, really want to thank though our guests for giving this presentation. I want to thank everyone with their comments. I really appreciate everyone having their viewpoints on this. I know this can be a contentious issue, but again, I just want to make sure that everyone is coming from the same place. And I know we might not agree on how to address the problem, but I do hope that as a group and as a party, we can agree that our goal is to house everyone, to give everyone the opportunity to be able to live in a safe, secure place, to be able to have access to their basic needs, and to be able to live a life that is comfortable and worth living. I want our communities to feel comfortable, and I believe that we can find ways and areas where we can agree and ways we can move forward. This is a crisis. There is no arguing that it is not a crisis. I do not know almost anyone who could afford the current home that they live in, let alone I know very few people who can afford to move to a new place if they didn't have assets already in their home. So thank you all for the presentation. Thank you for coming out. Thank you for your comments. And again, I apologize to those of you who did have additional comments. If we have time at the end of the meeting, we can come back to this. But until then, thank you so much. And we're going to move on. So thank you.
See you next time.
See you soon. So with that, we're going to move on to another exciting topic. in a somewhat different vein, although who knows, it may overlap in some places, but we have a very special guest today. It is candidate for DA in Alameda County, Jimmie Wilson. And so without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Wilson.
Thank you, Evan. First, thank you for the invitation. I was looking forward to this today. I have a job as the deputy DA in Alameda County, and I'm starting a trial, but this getting out to the people and talking to your group about why this race is so important is, I think it's really an important time in our community. Let me tell you a little bit about myself. I've been a member of the Alameda County District Attorney's Office for about 16 years. I've lived in Alameda County for about, I guess it's like 36 years. I'm really passionate about my community. I'm really passionate about the people in this community. We are a diverse community. To understand who I am, you have to understand where I grew up. I grew up in the Bayview Hunters Point area of San Francisco, which was a pretty tough neighborhood. I've had friends who went to prison, friends who died at an early age. We had challenges with education, with nutrition, anything you could think of, medical care. And I was a plumber for 16 years, went to school at night, actually injured my back on the job, retrained myself, and came to the DA's office. And in the Alameda County District Attorney's Office, I've tried every single case you can think of, from murder cases, from rape cases, child sexual assault, gang cases. And what I found throughout my career as a deputy district attorney is that we were disconnected with the community. We were disconnected in the way that we did justice. And because of that, these policies that were in place, we didn't serve victims, and we weren't serving defendants the way that we should. And I believe in crime prevention. That has always been my motto. Most defense attorneys that I come in contact with, they know my background, and I go out of my way, if I can, to find a way to redirect people out of the system. I believe in accountability, but I also believe that we have to give people a second chance. The weird part about my candidacy is that I am endorsed by some of the most progressive defense attorneys in the county, but I'm also endorsed by the police. I just received the endorsement of the Oakland Police Department. I've just received the endorsement of PORAC, which is a statewide police organization that represents over 930 organizations throughout the state of California. And I think the reason why a lot of these organizations are supporting me, and a lot of defense attorneys support me, is the way I do my job and the way I see justice in this county. I believe that we need to be connected with our community. Speaking to a group like yours is so important to me. Throughout my time running for DA, I've reached out to people in the county from Fremont all the way to Albany. And one of the tragic parts of those meetings are that a lot of people don't realize who their district attorney is and what they do. And it is my job and is my goal that when I win this race, that I am going to connect our community to my office, and we're going to do our jobs the right way. There's a lot more that I could talk about, but I'd love to, hear questions and try to answer as many of them as I can.
Thank you so much for that. And then just to remind everyone, just raise your hand for any questions you may have, and I'll be happy to call on you. Jeff, would you like to go first?
Actually, I had my hand up from last time. I forgot to lower it. I'm sorry.
No, well, if you have a question and you'd like to go first, since you have waited patiently.
Well, yeah, yes. I missed a little bit of your professional background. Could you just elaborate on that? And if you've already covered that, I'm sorry for asking you to repeat it.
No problem, Jeff. Well, I've been a deputy district attorney in the Alameda County District Attorney's Office for about 16 years. During that time, I've been a trial assignment just about 85 to 90% of that time, handling murder cases, child sexual assault, rape cases, gang. I just got off the gang unit. Just to give you a little bit more background that I haven't spoken about, I'm on the executive board of the South County branch of the Alameda NAACP. What I'm doing right now is I'm going around with 5 other people from our organization, and we're training police officers on community policing and implicit bias. Part of who I am and what I am is that I want to make our community safer, and I want to make our law enforcement partners better.
Thank you. Yeah, that sounds like it's very much in line with the ACLU's recent effort of the past couple of years to promote that kind of atmosphere and training in police justice systems all over the country. So anything to say about that? You must know about that.
I do, and it's the NAACP. That's also part of our mission statement too. That's part of our strategy, is to promote community policing, which is right in line with the ACLU. I mean, we have to. I can tell you from my background a little bit. When I grew up in the Bayview, the police were an active part of our community. They were our PAL coaches. First time I ever went to camp, it was coordinated with the Catholic Church and the San Francisco Police Department. Somehow, criminal justice was moving in the right way, and it pivoted and moved away from that type of strategy. And I agree, that strategy is right in line to what we should be doing. And because different cities have different departments and they have different strategies when it comes to community empowerment, we're going around to all the cities. We haven't made it to Livermore. I have a training we're doing up in Rohnert Park with the Alameda County Sheriff's Office, talking to them about community policing. So we're trying as fast as we can to reach all these different agencies and to promote that type of outreach.
Well, that sounds great. Thank you very much.
Wonderful, thank you. And next up, I believe, is Asa.
Yeah, well, thank you for taking your time. This is always a very important race that doesn't get covered enough. So my question actually revolves around policing to a degree as well. I know there was an instance where the predecessor, Nancy O'Malley, chose not to press charges or raise charges against a police officer. I know there's some questions in there that I'm not going to get into, but would you be willing to actually press charge against a police officer when wrongdoing is shown versus kind of what I would say the typical behavior of, looking the other way and administrative leave for 2 weeks?
Well, right now I'm on our officer involved shooting team, which means I respond to officer involved shootings where a person has died by the hands of an officer. So that's something that I've been doing for the last 3.5 years. But also when I came into this office, there was a culture of basically rubber stamping anything that law enforcement did. That to me created it created these patterns. Like I believe that most police officers, the majority of police officers, want to do their jobs the right way. I believe that most police officers are professional. But when we see instances where police aren't doing their jobs, in fact, they're violating someone's constitutional rights, or they're hurting people they come in contact with, I believe that the DA's office has to be transparent and has to be independent. I don't believe that a police officer should be treated any differently than anyone on the street. If someone breaks the law, then we should hold them accountable. That's the way it should work. It hasn't worked that way in the past. And when I'm DA, it will work that way. We will hold police officers accountable.
Thank you very much. It's excellent to hear. Monith.
Hey, Jimmy, thanks so much for taking the time to chat. Really appreciate it. I have two questions. I hope that's okay. The first question is around criminalization of youth, and I wanted to get your thoughts on that. What are your thoughts, and it's a bit more specifically, not charging those under 18 as adults, closing down juvenile detention facilities, community-based recovery for those who kind of get caught up in the school to prison pipeline. What are your thoughts or your vision for what that looks like if you become DA?
This is the foundation of my candidacy and what I want to do. I want to create a community-based prevention program, a community-based diversion program that would be connected with juvenile hall. I believe that we can't incarcerate our way to public safety, and that includes our youth. I can't tell you that I would absolutely not charge a young person as an adult. Just because public safety may require me to do so, but I can tell you that I am reaching out to community groups like Ella Baker Center and places of that nature to talk to them about connecting them with our office to start programs that are getting young people early on and trying to redirect them out of the criminal justice system. One of the people who are endorsing me, Ernie Castillo, he and I have sat down and talked about how we can have a community-based diversion program that addresses our young people, that gets guns out of their hands, that if a young person commits a crime, even if that is a violent crime, we're going to do individualized justice, individualized assessments. I can tell you from my own experience, and I've looked at DA offices around the country, no DA's office has a strong diversion program, a strong youth-based diversion program, because most of those organizations aren't connected to the community, aren't connected to people who know how to do that kind of work. And currently in my office, I can tell you what we're doing when it comes to juveniles. We are not really addressing them the way that we should. There are people with behavioral problems, with educational problems, with problems in the home. There are young people that should be redirected in a certain way, and we're not doing it. I can also tell you for first-time offenders, it's basically the same thing. We get first-time adult offenders. I recently had a case where this 18-year-old man, and I say man, he's a kid, committed a robbery, and the one DA in my office wanted to send him to prison. And I said, you can't send an 18-year-old to prison. There has to be an alternative. And I got with the defense attorney and I said, okay, let's sit down and let's figure out what kind of services we can get for this young man and how can we redirect his energies. And so we can be proactive on the front end, so we're not seeing people on the back end, repeating and creating that pattern of in and out of prison, in and out of the system, and then they're not productive, and that doesn't keep us safe.
Yeah, appreciate that response. Thanks. My second question is, you mentioned that for the past 3.5 years, you were in the officer involved shooting subcommittee of the district office. Is there an instance in which a specific instance in which you would have liked to move forward with charges or would have liked to move forward with investigation that you saw that the current sheriff's office or the current district attorney's office did not?
I can tell you the case I'm thinking of wasn't a case that I was investigating. It was a case that a colleague was investigating, and the DA decided not to press charges. And I found that to be problematic. I think when someone commits a crime and then as a district attorney, you have to be objective when you are making those kind of decisions. We can make subjective decisions when something is where something is close and you're deciding what charges you want to bring. But when you decide not to charge someone for political reasons, I find that to be really problematic. But as a deputy DA, you really don't have the power to change that. You can give your opinion. I can tell you as a DA in Alameda County, we can always give our opinions, but ultimately it's the DA who makes the decision.
Got it. Thank you.
Sure.
All right. Thank you very much for that. Next up, I believe, is Richard.
Hey, Jimmy. First of all, thanks for being here. I had a more basic question. Given that so far there have been 3 candidates that have announced in this race, I was just curious to hear what you feel differentiates you from the other 2 that are running for this position.
Oh, thank you. That's, it's interesting. They're at the different end of the spectrum. When Pam Price ran against Nancy in 2018, and I knew nothing about her. So I went to, I think I went to 2 debates and just kind of listened to her and just try to understand her perspective on criminal justice. And it took me the first time I listened to her, some of her answers were confusing. The second time, it was at a forum where she was asked a specific question about misdemeanor cases and how she handled misdemeanors, and she said she wouldn't prosecute those cases. And it just struck me that she didn't understand that misdemeanors were probably the bulk of all the cases that we handle, because those are DUIs, those quality of life crimes, some like domestic violence, some sexual assault. And so I think what differentiates me from Ms. Price is that it's my experience. For Mr. Wiley, who I've known since my entire time in the office, he's been a DA for 30 years, and he has like this old school mentality about criminal justice. I've never seen him do anything that was inventive or progressive or something that would impact us either at a state or local level. I've known, he's been in a management position since I've known him, and we've had discussions about what needs to change. And I found that a lot of what his thinking is archaic and is kind of, the way it was like 50 years ago. And so I think the difference between Mr. Wiley and I don't mean any disrespect, is that he thinks of the justice system the way that it used to be, and he's been in a position to change it, and he never has. And if you speak to any of the people who know me, any people who are, before you guys eventually, you have your candidate form, and before you make a decision, I hope that you reach out and investigate all 3 candidates and talk to people on the other side and my opponents and ask them, what they think of me, ask judges what they think, and talk to the police and see what they think. And I think the difference between Mr. Wiley and I is that I'm respected by the more respected. I don't want to say he isn't respected. I want to say I'm more respected by people in the criminal justice community.
Thank you.
All right, thank you very much for that. Next up, I believe, is Joseph.
So one thing I did want to ask you about is, so it's not maybe as major a problem as some of the other issues, but I was curious what your thoughts were on the fact that the justice system has kind of increasingly become the first resort for mental health issues. So people will get a mental health crisis and then they end up in jail rather than getting treatment. So you're probably aware of this more than I am.
Yeah, Joseph, you know, growing up in Bayview, I grew up in like the 60s and the early 70s, and my mom was a social worker, and she just recently passed away. But prior to that, when I told her I was doing this, one of the issues that we really talked about was what we used to do with people who were going through a crisis, a mental health crisis, and what we're doing now. And one of the really central principles that we came away with is that we don't have enough facilities to adequately care for people. I don't think there's a strategy on how to care for people with mental health problems. One of the strange parts about Alameda County is that we do have a facility that's vacant, North County Jail, that could be like, it can be adapted. We can take away the bars. We can provide housing and beds for people who have mental health problems, instead of, right now, it's you incarcerate and then you release, and there's no treatment. And we need to be better. We need to train our law enforcement partners to be better. I want to say it was like 6 months ago, there was an incident in Livermore where a gentleman had an episode. He had a psychotic break and he attacked his friend with a chair. And the Livermore police, they didn't know any better. I mean, they responded. It was like almost every officer in the force responded. They had drones in the air. And I start thinking about the resources that went towards this one assault and what we could have, and eventually they arrested the gentleman. The case came to me and I talked to the defense attorney and we got proactive and we found him a bed to go to and we got him into a facility. But how great would it be if the police would have done that on the front end? If that person wouldn't have been introduced to the criminal justice system, if there were strategies and mechanisms for helping people like that. And I think we can do that. I think we have to have a conversation with our community leaders. We have to have a conversation with our elected officials, with our county supervisors, and we have to create strategies to deal with people with those kinds of issues.
All right. Thank you for that. And Mr. Wilson, just to make sure, I want to be respectful of your time. It looks like we have 3 questions in the queue. Are you okay with?
Oh, I'm great. Yeah, you guys, I'll answer all your questions.
Okay, sounds good. Then next up is Jackie.
Thank you. I don't know if you're aware, I assume you're aware, the Alameda County Central Committee voted to not accept any endorsements or approve candidates that have accepted endorsements from police. What would you say to the Alameda County Central Committee or some of our members who sit on that committee why you are accepting the endorsement of Oakland PD? Thank you.
Oh, that's a great question, Jackie. Because the district attorney is the lead law enforcement officer in this county. I don't know if everyone on the Central Committee realizes that. And as the lead law enforcement officer, you have to work with the police. In fact, you have to have the trust of the police, and the police have to trust you. One of the ways of focusing on accountability and training, what I'm doing, I'm not the DA right now, and I can only do this through my organization, through the NAACP. We're actually going out there trying to train police to make our citizens safer. Especially as a Black man living in this community. Right now I'm a DA, so of course a lot of officers know me, but I have an African-American son. I have friends with African-American sons. We need our police to be awake. We need them to be better trained. We need them to know that they're going to be accountability. And we also need to have a dialogue with the police. If you notice what's going on in San Francisco, Chesa Boudin is in a constant battle with the San Francisco Police Department because of that relationship and how splintered that is. I will tell you that I will not accept police money, but I will always accept police support. I will accept support from people that I either trust, believe in, and need their help. And this is really important because we cannot abandon our police because of what's going on right now and the conversations that are going on. I grew up in that community. I don't know anyone from the Black community, anyone who lived where I lived, who is saying we want less police. We want better police. We want more police presence. We want our homes to be safe. We want our kids to be safe. And in order to do that, we have to have a dialogue with the police. So anyone in the Central Committee who wanted to talk to me about that, I came into the DA's office when I was 40 years old. My moral compass was already set. I knew the difference between right and wrong, and I knew what was best for my community because I grew up in that community, an underserved community. And I know, and if you talk to any African-American person who grew up in the same situation that I grew up in, they are not saying defund the police. They are not saying we want less police. They're saying we need better police.
Thank you. Great answer. Next up is Helen.
Did you say me, Evan?
Yeah.
Okay. Hi. I have two questions. One, do you think that you began another occupation and then switched gives you a different, what different view does that give you other than someone who just started out in law school? And two, thank you for mentioning Livermore Police response to that incident, because we meet regularly with Jeremy, our police chief, and we'll bring it up.
Oh, thank you.
But also, do you support the move to have mental health professionals, perhaps with police backup, now answer these calls rather than police?
Sure. I think the two are kind of interrelated. I believe coming into the DA's office when I did, I don't know you guys, I don't think if I told you guys this, I was actually a juror 5 times also while I was a plumber. So I saw the other side of that door, the criminal justice door, the deliberation part. I think it gives me a unique perspective. I don't know anyone in my office that has my background, that actually had a full first career and then came in with this different type of perspective about the criminal justice system. To even piggyback on that, after my introduction as a juror, I went to Berkeley as an undergrad, and I studied the law the history of the law. I was a legal studies major. I wanted to understand the law better. I wanted to understand the impact that it had on communities that I came from, and also other types of communities. I took classes in Indian law. I took classes in other areas, Chinese law, other kinds of areas of the law, because I wanted to have a full rounded perspective of our legal system. It transformed the way that I try cases, the way that I see defendants. It's funny, I tell defense attorneys always ask me why I'm the way that I am, because I listen a lot. And I tell them because I'm trying to get it right. And I know I don't have all the answers. And I can't say that's typical thinking for my office. When I told a lot of the people in the legal community, in the Alameda County legal community that I was running, they asked me how could they help. And I don't think that has anything to do with the type of person I am more than the way that I do my job. And I think I do my job the way that I do because of where I came from and because I had this earlier career and I had a different perspective. When it comes to mental health and having social workers ride with police officers, it's funny, that's was something that my mom and I talked about years ago. My mother was a social activist. She was a community activist. My father was the same way. My dad was a part of the Urban League. He was part of the NAACP in San Francisco. And they talked about service and they talked about community service and they talked about what we needed to do for people who are underserved, people with mental health problems, poor people, people who needed help. And my mom and dad would always say, I didn't understand why we just send people with a gun to respond to situations where someone was having a crisis. And my mom said, well, why don't they have people trained to go with officers to deal with those type of situations? And I want to tell you guys, this was 15 years ago. This was a conversation with my mother and father. My dad died in 2010, and my mom passed away 2 years ago. And we are having those discussions, but I'm not seeing enough action. And I think as a DA, you have to lead the discussion. You have to get out there and talk about changes that you want to see and partner with people who can make those changes. And I think that's at the state level, at the federal level, at the local level, we can do those. We can solve this problem. It's a solvable, and there's solutions out there.
Thank you very much. I think, Mary, you'll be our last question for the night, and then I have a couple closing things.
Well, if possible, I have a double question. First of all, since we are talking about alternative solutions to mental health crises and other types of crises that may not necessarily require police intervention, are you familiar with the CAHOOTS program in Eugene, Oregon?
I am not, but I am going to look into it.
It has been around for 30 years. It's well embedded in the community, very successful. And CAHOOTS people, they get dispatched on the Eugene Police Department service channel, and the calls are triaged through the Central Lane Communications Center. And each van is staffed with a medic, a nurse, EMT, and a crisis worker. And so the triaging decides who to send where.
Right.
And there have, the last article I read about this, out of several thousand calls in the year that was being discussed, only about 100, was it 126 of them, where the crisis intervention team called for police backup. So it was very successful. And it's a model for the nation.
I am going to look into that. I really, it sounds inspiring.
I was impressed. The other thing is I do a lot of reading and lots of articles, newspapers. And in the process, I've heard about difficulties that district attorneys in various cities have maintaining relationships with the police. You have to have a relationship with the police, but there are times when the police themselves are the problem. There are instances of corruption. And I have read about district attorneys who got caught in the middle because they need police support, but they were also the ones who also needed to take steps about the corruption. How do you see that picture, and what situation? Have you ever faced such a situation? And if so, what do you think? How would that be for you?
I can tell you, you know, it's great that we first talked about my background, because I came in from a community where the police were not considered our friends. I came from a community where, you know, in my trainings, I talked to the police about the number of times I've been stopped. I left my home and moved to San Jose. I played football for San Jose State, and San Jose State, as the city of San Jose, excuse me, had a problem with stopping Black people, especially Black men. I think it was a 45-day period, I was stopped 60 times. And I've relayed that message to police officers, talking about understanding the perspective of a Black male living in a community where the police presence is seen as a negative. I can tell you personally, I would never, ever just ignore anyone committing a crime, especially someone with a gun and a badge. When I talk to police officers, especially when I talk to the Oakland Police Department and I asked for their endorsement, the thing that I told them was, I will praise you when you do your job well, but I will be your worst nightmare if you do something wrong. And I truly want them to believe that. It is so important to me that you have a DA. I can tell you, I am not a politician. This is the first office I ever run for, and I'm running for it because I live in this community and my community is important to me. And because I came from where I came from, I have no problem doing what my job and doing it the way that it should be done. And I can tell you, I've had conversations with police officers all through the county, and I've told them, if you want a DA like me, you have to know that it comes with certain conditions. And those conditions are, I'm gonna always do my job. And if you break the law, if you hurt someone, if there's corruption, I'm gonna hold you accountable, just like I will hold everyone else accountable. Police officers do not get a pass.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. And I want to thank everyone for their excellent questions. I really appreciate you taking the time to come out to our meeting and, visit with us beforehand and make sure that you listen to our discussion as well. You had some very insightful answers. I found this personally very fascinating. I want to give you a moment just to kind of say your last thoughts. And so turn it over to you.
Oh, thank you. I'll just make it brief. This election, running for a district attorney is something that's, it took a lot of soul searching, because I was in a position in my office where I was able to do the cases I wanted to do. I was able to, I was respected, and I couldn't ask for anything more. But sometimes in your life, you have to step up, and you have to, when you see a problem, and you have to try to fix it or try to repair it. And as I've gone through my journey in my second career, I realized that we were doing our jobs wrong, and we need better, and we have to do better. And as district attorney, I will do better. And so to leave you guys with those thoughts, and I look forward to talking to you guys again. And everyone just have a really good night, and thanks for having me.
Thank you so much again for coming out. And I just want to say, for anyone who wants more information or to support Jimmie, you can go to JimmieWilson4DA.com, find more information as well as opportunities to donate or support there. I'll put the link in chat as well. And I do want to just briefly also turn it back to Helen for a moment to make a little announcement about another upcoming event in the Tri-Valley with Mr. Wilson. So Helen?
Sure. Live More Indivisible is having a forum. Hi, Jimmie. I've been emailing you with the three Democratic candidates, or the three candidates, sorry, for DA on November 14th. We'll get a flyer to Evan to put on the website, and it'll be very interesting seeing all three of them, but it's very nice meeting you, Jim.
You also.
But anyways, November 14th at 1:30, it's going to be a webinar, and hope to see a lot of you there. Oh, but if you want to send questions, please send them to livermoreindivisible@gmail.com. If you have questions, we can ask everyone, but that'll all be on the flyer. Thanks, Evan.
Helen, if you could copy me on it. This is Jackie. I'll make sure it gets posted on the website and create an event. Thanks.
Sure, Jackie, will do.
And that November 14th it's a Sunday. So, and thank you, Helen, for coordinating all of this.
Thank you so much. Livermore Indivisible is always a great partner and has many excellent events. So I look forward to the candidate forum coming up. So with that, thank you very much. Best of luck on your campaign, and thank you for coming out tonight. You can stay for the rest of the meeting if you'd like. We're going to do just some of our regular business. Since we're now running a little bit behind, we are going to speed through it. So.
Okay, thanks everyone.
Thank you. Have a great evening.
Oh, you too.
All right. So we are going to kind of go through the next couple items fairly quickly. I want to do, I forgot to put this on the agenda, but we did put it in the announcements, which is a oversight on my part. But I do want to do, we have a resolution on supporting Afghan refugees in our communities. I'm going to post a link to that in chat right now. And Jackie, do you mind giving a little bit more information on this?
Yes. This resolution was submitted by the Honorable Andy Kelly from District 14 and was sponsored by Harris Mojadidi, Alama Tabibi, sorry people if I mess up your name, Honorable Aisha Wahab, and endorsed by the Alameda County Central Committee. So we took this same resolution. It didn't seem to need many modifications for our purposes and just replaced Central Committee with Tri-Valley Democratic Club. So it reads, whereas ongoing uncertainty and violence in Afghanistan and the takeover of the Afghan government by the Taliban has created a humanitarian crisis with rapidly deteriorating human rights and reduction in safety, particularly for those vulnerable individuals, including but not limited to women, girls, members of the LGBTQIA community, those who have direct ties to the US government and military members of ethnic minority communities, those who are Shia Muslim, adherents of non-Muslim faiths, including those Sikh, Hindu faiths, and individuals who work for or have ties to aid organizations. Whereas refugees and their families face a multitude of challenges when arriving in the United States and transitioning to a new life, including but not limited to resettlement, language barriers, understanding cultural nuances, financial hardships, assessing education, finding work, legal assistance. And whereas federal and state leaders in California, specifically in Alameda County, home to the largest concentration of Afghans and Afghan Americans in the United States and the Greater Bay Area, have the unique and moral responsibility to welcome Afghan refugees in our communities while honoring the commitments of the United States government, assisting in the evacuation of vulnerable groups, providing support to organizations who serve the refugee community, and showing support for the Afghan community during this difficult time. Therefore, be it resolved that the Tri-Valley Democratic Club supports and welcomes refugees from Afghanistan into our community and urges our state and federal leaders to act immediately and with determination and rightfully bring at-risk and vulnerable Afghan peoples and their families to the United States for safety and prosperity, and they afford full benefits to transition into American life. Especially our club, along with the Alameda County Democratic Central Committee, encourages California to accept more, house more Afghan refugees than any other US state. And therefore, be it resolved that the Tri-Valley Democratic Club supports access to significant opportunities and benefits to individuals and families arriving from Afghanistan, including but not limited to immediate eligibility for reception and placement afforded under Special Immigrant Visa, SIV, and refugee status conditions within a week of arriving on US soil. So with that, I'd like to make a motion that the club passes and supports this resolution.
All right, we have a motion. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
All right, second from Mary.
Thank you, Mary.
Any further discussion? Hearing none, let us vote. So all in favor, say aye.
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 All opposed?
Aye.
Hearing no opposition. Oh, and any abstentions? Hearing none, the motion passes unanimously. Thank you very much for the support. I think this is a great one. So moving on, we're going to go to the treasurer's report. Ellen?
Just curiosity, can everybody hear me? I got a new microphone. I just wanted to make sure.
You're good.
So I'm having an issue with matching Quicken with the bank account. So I don't have a formal statement. I'm working with Bob this weekend. I'll get it, okay? But our expenses for the last month were, we had the expense for the website, which is $172.80. Also, our semi-annual post office box came due, it's $113. Our income for the month was $477.91. We have 124 members and a balance in our checking account of $2,806.98.
All right, thank you very much. With that, I do want to use this section of the agenda to put forward a motion to support the Young Dems Gala with a donation of $500 as a supporter. So this would be $500 for the East Bay Young Democrats Gala as the organizer level to support our friends there. So I will put forward the motion. I do need a second.
I second. This is Jackie.
And then with that, do we have any further discussion on this item? All right, hearing none, all in favor, say aye.
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 All opposed? Any abstentions? An abstention from Alan. With that, it passes with one abstention. Richard, can you make sure to get Alan the information to be able to pay for that?
Sounds good, thanks.
All right, awesome. And if you have any difficulties, I'll connect you also. Okay, so thank you for the treasurer's report. Moving on, the next item up is the approval of the May minutes. And Jackie, after that will be the central committee updates, so you can roll into that.
Okay. I believe, Evan, you did attach all of the minutes. Does anybody need more time to review these minutes? I did include a lot of detail this time because there were so many great links provided from our presentation from our special speakers last month. So I did add all these links. I would encourage everybody to sign up for the Climate Action Now. I signed up and set up a group. So I'm ready to start my climate action challenges now. Does anybody see any corrections, omissions? Anything that needs to be corrected on the meeting minutes? Okay, I don't know, Evan, if you want to call for a vote on to approve those?
Yep, so then hearing no corrections or changes, can we get a motion for approval of the minutes?
You didn't say anything. I don't know. Can I make a motion on my own minutes? I don't think so.
I don't know, but
I move that we approve them.
Thanks, Helen.
motion by Helen. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
All right,
Val.
second by Val. All in favor, say aye.
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 Opposed? And any abstentions?
I'll abstain since I wrote them.
All right, the motion passes with one abstention from Jackie. And then carry on with the Central Committee update.
Okay, I'll be as quick as possible. Let's see, the meeting, the last Central Committee meeting, there was a lot of discussion about the recent bylaws change with the LGBTQIA and being able to kick somebody out of the committee, or at least they won't be able to vote in the committee any longer. And there was charges brought against the mayor of Fremont, Mayor Lily May. I'm not going to go into the meeting itself. I did post, there was a special meeting that was held last Thursday where they went through the charges and some of the committee members voted. Not everybody was there. I think they had a total of 31 people vote yes. And 3 people voted, 2 people voted no and 1 abstained. I posted the special meeting on our Facebook page, and I would encourage people to listen to that meeting, listen to the charges brought or the accusations brought and the reasoning behind the way the committee voted. They did end up voting yes to, I guess, hold her accountable for these charges. So I don't believe she can now vote in the Central Committee. And we did lose 2 people over this. An alternate for Rocky stepped down he was not able to vote on this because of his role as a vice chair. But his alternate ended up resigning over it, as well as Martha Krieger stepped down. And that was painful to hear. But I'd encourage members to go and listen to it and make up your own mind and listen to the reasoning behind why they voted the way they did. Another thing that is coming up, there will be a training session, a democratic training session for members, for people who want to run for office. And I'm going to give you the link to register. Obviously, this is only for Democrats. If you are planning to run for office and want training, this is free. Space is limited, and that training will be on November 6th. And then the other thing that happened in the meeting was we listened to a presentation by our state controller, as well as Democratic Party chair, Betty, where's my notes? I wrote down all the stuff she said, but I missed her name. Her name is Yi, and she is the party controller. I would suggest you watch the session, and they talked about how we're going to make up funding loss now that law enforcement contributions and oil industry contributions, the Democratic Party is not accepting any of those. And they're going to have a special meeting October 24th, and to try to brainstorm how they're going to meet their priorities and fund some of these programs with the loss of some of these donations, since the committee's no longer taking these donations. Then they'll send those priorities to the executive committee. So those are the highlights. That's it. Watch the special session about the mayor. And then if anybody's interested in this training, check out that site and sign up. Yeah, that's it. A little disjointed. Sorry about that.
Yeah, that was great. Thank you so much for that. I watched the special meeting. I have thoughts, but really the main one is it was complex, and I think a lot of people did a lot of soul searching on it. So I have gotten a number of calls from people asking about it with strong opinions either way. And I would say the same thing, as I think watch the meeting. You can come to your own decisions about it, but it is worth seeing what actually happened, not the partial information that people are getting right now.
Right, and there were plenty of letters in support of the mayor. I think one of the biggest things that sank personally is the campaigning that is being done with a Republican who has not very good views on LGBTQ issues. So the campaigning itself, and her office said they weren't aware of this campaigning being done with this Republican. So again, watch it, make your own, come to your own conclusion. Tough issue.
Evan, could I just add a couple of things quickly to that?
Oh, sure.
Yeah, just reporting. I'm not offering opinions here. Just quickly to add to what Jackie said, the two people that resigned, the alternate for Rocky Fernandez, is that his last name?
Yeah, that's correct. I think.
Yeah. He resigned because he did not want his position to reflect badly upon Rocky. Apparently there were some people that spoke to him before the meeting, and there apparently may have been some conflict of interest discussions. He didn't want any of that to affect who he represented. So he resigned rather than represent Rocky in the face of that. And the other person, Martha Krieger, resigned because she disagreed with Ro Khanna's vote, which was no. Ro Khanna voted no, along with another person who, Bill Quirk, who does not obtain endorsement from the local committee, but rather they get endorsed at the state level. Because of her disagreement with Ro Khanna's vote, she resigned. And then the sanction to Lily May is that she is not eligible now to be endorsed by the County Democratic Committee in any future races. And then anyone who does endorse her puts their own standing in the committee at jeopardy. So that's all I wanted to say.
And thank you, Jeff.
Yeah, thank you very much for that clarification. Very much appreciated. Yeah, so if you're interested in this topic, please do watch the video. It is definitely a worthwhile exercise. With that, so thank you for the announcements. We're going to move on to general announcements and such, but I see Joseph raise the hand. So Joseph, go ahead. Oh, did you have a question, Joseph? I can't hear. Are you muted?
Do you have like a link for that video? Like, is that on the Tri-Valley website or something for the Lily May thing?
I put it on our Facebook page. Do you have access to that?
I don't know if I do.
It was on the Alameda County Central Committee posts everything to Facebook. So I just did a share through Facebook.
Got it.
Yeah, and you don't need an account to access it either. It's open.
Is it? You want me to put the link in there then from Facebook?
I believe it is like, well, I don't know about ours, but I believe the county one you don't need an account to do because it's a public group or public page. So you just need to like be able to like go to the URL and you should be able to scroll through and see. Actually, I think they live stream all of their meetings, so you'll be able to see all of them there, even the ones that aren't related to this.
Let me see if I can get a link.
Thank you. And while you're looking for that link, we are a little bit past the end time, but I do want to give a chance for anyone with any announcements, any additional input or anything that they'd like to say for future meetings, any ideas for future meetings. So I open the floor to all of you. And while you're thinking, if you do have anything, I would just to remind everyone, for the November meeting, we are looking for partners or ideas on how we can do a giving event of some sort. So something to give back to our community. So if you have any ideas, please email me or Jackie about that. Any other announcements?
I just posted the Alameda County Central Committee's video. That one should be public. I don't think I posted mine as public. That one should be public.
All right. Well, I'm hearing no announcements. So thank you for posting that. Thank you for the discussion. I hope everyone enjoyed today's meeting. It was a jam-packed one for sure. And I look forward to seeing you all in November. Everyone have a wonderful evening.
Thank you.
Thank
Happy
you.
Halloween.
Thank you. Good night.
Happy Halloween, everyone.
Good night.
Happy Halloween.